Hey guys, tonight we're taking a truly chilling journey back to the cold, rugged lands of the Viking Age, a period famed for its fierce warriors, its magnificent longships, and its epic sagas of exploration and conquest. But we're not focusing on their triumphs or their gods. Instead, we're pulling back the rough linen curtain to uncover how horrifyingly short your life was in the Viking Age. Forget romanticised notions of long, adventurous lives. You're about to discover a grim reality where every breath was a gamble, every milestone a hard-won victory against overwhelming odds, and where death, in its most brutal forms, was a constant, intimate companion from the very moment you entered the world. This wasn't a time of peaceful longevity. It was a desperate, relentless struggle for mere existence, a battle against unseen killers and pervasive dangers that few survive to old age. Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive your first year without extreme luck, let alone an entire lifetime. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you right now? Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly standing in a smoky, dimly lit longhouse somewhere in Scandinavia, perhaps around the 9th or 10th century CE. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, damp earth, unwashed wool, and a pervasive, almost palpable, sense of anxiety that you can almost taste. A woman in your family, perhaps your mother or your wife, has just given birth. You gaze down at the tiny swaddled bundle, a new life, utterly fragile, utterly vulnerable, and in that very moment, the grim reality of the fickle start to life in the Viking Age begins. Your existence is immediately overshadowed by the terrifying spectre of infant mortality, making your very birth a profound gamble for survival. The mortality rates for infants and young children were astronomically high throughout the Viking Age, mirroring and sometimes exceeding similar rates across medieval Europe. This wasn't just a statistical likelihood, it was a common, heartbreaking reality that every family faced, often multiple times. Historians estimate that anywhere from 25% to 50% of all children would not survive their first year of life. Of those who survived infancy, many more would not reach the age of 5, and only a fraction, perhaps 50% of the initial births would make it to adulthood around age 15 to 20. This meant that for every adult you saw, there were countless buried infants, their lives tragically cut short before they could even learn to walk or speak. You would likely know numerous families in your village who had buried multiple children, their lives a tapestry of profound grief and repeated loss. It truly sucked to watch babies die constantly. The reasons for this horrifying infant mortality were manifold and deeply intertwined with the harsh realities of Viking Age life, creating a constant, multifaceted assault on new life. Infectious diseases. This was by far the primary killer. Newborns and infants, with their underdeveloped immune systems, were incredibly vulnerable to a vast array of pathogens. Diseases like smallpox, measles, influenza, diphtheria, whooping cough, and various fevers would sweep through communities, often claiming children indiscriminately. Cramped, unsanitary living conditions in longhouses, poor ventilation, shared sleeping spaces, proximity to animals, contaminated water sources, wells, streams, and the pervasive lack of basic hygiene. No understanding of germ theory created ideal breeding grounds for contagion. Imagine your tiny baby, racked by fever and coughing, their delicate body struggling to breathe, their skin hot to the touch, knowing there was no effective medicine to save them, only prayers and desperate folk remedies. Malnutrition. Even if born healthy, the quality of infant nutrition was often precarious, if the mother died in childbirth a common occurrence, as explored in The Awful and Dangerous Reality of Childbirth for a Medieval Woman, or was too ill to breastfeed. Infants might be fed animal milk, often diluted or contaminated, or rudimentary gruels. These alternatives were frequently nutritionally inadequate, lacking essential vitamins and antibodies from breast milk, leading to widespread infant malnutrition. This would further weaken their already fragile bodies and increase their susceptibility to every passing disease. For weaning infants, access to soft, digestible, and nutrient-rich complementary foods was limited and often led to dietary deficiencies. Birth trauma. The act of childbirth itself, without modern medical interventions like C-sections or precise understanding of fetal positioning, was incredibly dangerous. Difficult or prolonged labours could result in severe trauma to the newborn, including brain damage, broken bones, or internal injuries, leading to stillbirths or deaths shortly after birth. Midwives, however skilled, had limited ability to intervene safely in such cases, often acting more as emotional support than medical practitioners in the face of severe complications. Exposure. Infants were incredibly vulnerable to the harsh climate. Extreme cold in the long dark winters, or excessive heat in summer, could be fatal, especially in poorly insulated homes or if infants were left unattended for even short periods during outdoor chores. A chilling night could turn a healthy baby into a hypothermic casualty by morning. Accidents without modern safety measures like cribs or playpens. Infants and young children were susceptible to various domestic accidents, falls from longhouse beds or benches, burns from open hearths, drowning in nearby bodies of water, or accidental suffocation in crowded sleeping arrangements known as overlaying, were all tragic, yet common occurrences. Lack of medical care. Pediatric medicine, as we know it, did not exist. Infants and children would receive basic care from mothers, grandmothers, wise women velour, or local healers, but their knowledge and remedies were often ineffective against serious illnesses. There were no vaccines, no antibiotics, no specialised treatments for childhood diseases, and certainly no paediatricians. Your child's survival depended entirely on their innate resilience and immense, terrifying luck. It truly sucked to be born when getting sick usually meant dying. The psychological toll on parents, particularly the mother, would be immense. You would love your children fiercely, but live with a pervasive, chilling dread for their survival. Every cough, every fever, every minor ailment would be a source of profound anxiety. The experience of repeatedly giving birth, enduring agonizing labour, only to watch your precious children succumb to unseen killers, would be soul-shattering. You would bear the profound grief of multiple losses, often burying several children before one survived to adulthood. This was a continuous cycle of hope, love, loss, and renewed attempts, leading to profound emotional scarring and a pervasive sense of helplessness. Imagine the sheer agony of burying 3, 4, or 5 of your own children, their tiny bodies cold in your arms, their lives tragically cut short. It truly sucked to live a life of constant grieving. The naming customs of the Viking Age sometimes subtly reflected this high infant mortality. Some parents might delay naming a child until it survived its first few weeks or months, a grim acknowledgement of the low odds. The practice of giving children the names of deceased siblings was also common, highlighting both the continuity of the family line and the pervasive reality of infant loss. This unique detail underscores how deeply integrated child mortality was into the fabric of Viking Age life, a silent backdrop to every birth. One common misconception is that Viking Age people had stronger natural immunities and were less susceptible to childhood diseases than modern populations. In reality, while they adapted to certain environmental pressures, their overall health was significantly worse than today, and their lifespans drastically shorter, precisely due to the prevalence of infectious diseases, malnutrition, and limited medical knowledge. The idea of a hardy Viking child often hides the grim reality of immense suffering and high mortality rates in infancy and early childhood. Archaeological studies of Viking Age skeletal remains, particularly those of infants and young children from burial sites, consistently show widespread evidence of infectious diseases. Malnutrition, parotic hyperostosis from anemia, and bone lesions consistent with various illnesses, confirming the devastating impact of high infant mortality. Historians and bioarchaeologists still meticulously study these osteological records and compare them with demographic inferences from sagas and textual accounts to paint a comprehensive, and often heartbreaking, picture of Viking Age health for the youngest population. Furthermore, the social fabric of the community was profoundly shaped by infant mortality. The constant cycle of birth and death meant that families were always in a state of flux. Communities would witness widespread loss, and the collective grief would be a constant background to daily life. While support systems existed, the scale of the tragedy often overwhelmed communal resources, leaving families to grapple with their losses largely on their own. This shared suffering, however tragic, was an undeniable aspect of community life, forging bonds through collective endurance of immense sorrow. The very concept of childhood as a protected, playful, and carefree period was often brief and harsh. Children were expected to contribute to household labour from a very young age. If they survived infancy, their education was largely practical, preparing them for a life of toil, farming, or craft. The precious innocent period of early childhood, as we understand it today, was frequently cut short by the demands of survival and the grim reality of high mortality, ensuring that only the hardiest, or luckiest, would make it to adulthood and contribute to the family's legacy. So, your life in the Viking Age began with the grim reality of infant mortality's shadow, the terrifyingly high rates of child death, caused by rampant infectious diseases, malnutrition, birth trauma, and primitive medical care, ensured that your very birth was a profound gamble for survival. This devastating, yet common, reality, bringing immense grief and repeated heartbreak to parents, was the first, and perhaps most foundational, aspect of how horrifyingly short your life was in the Viking Age. Having miraculously survived the horrifying gamble of infant mortality, your earliest years in the Viking Age were still far from a carefree childhood. Instead, your existence was immediately consumed by brutal toil and harsh realities, ensuring that your short life was defined by relentless labour and constant dangers from a very young age. This made your childhood itself horrifyingly short. Imagine your life from the moment you could walk, perhaps even earlier, in a Viking Age settlement, whether a thriving longhouse or a fledgling farm. Every hand was crucial for survival. You weren't playing with toys all day. You were expected to contribute to the household's labour, regardless of your tender age. Your childhood was less about innocent play and more about an early, rigorous apprenticeship in the skills necessary for survival in a demanding, agrarian, and often violent society. This was your school, your playground, and your proving ground, all rolled into one relentless daily grind. It truly sucked to have your childhood be a chore list that literally lasted from dawn till dusk. Your daily routine, if you were a child of a farmer, the vast majority of the population would begin before dawn. Often in the smoky, dimly lit longhouse, you would be among the first to rise. Even before the sun fully climbed above the horizon, your tasks, however small initially, would be relentless and repetitive, designed to build strength, discipline, and practical skills. Hauling water. You might carry small, heavy buckets of water from the communal well or a nearby stream to your longhouse, a constant physically demanding chore, especially in the biting cold of winter or when streams were frozen over. This instilled early physical endurance and responsibility. Gathering firewood. For the central hearth and the longhouse's heating, you would spend hours collecting twigs, fallen branches, or dried animal dung from the surrounding land, often exposed to the biting winds, rain, or snow. This was a continuous, physically taxing chore, essential for warmth and cooking, and exposed you to the elements from a very young age. Tending animals. You would be responsible for feeding chickens, collecting eggs, leading sheep or goats to pasture, or helping with the milking. This taught you responsibility, patience, and endurance, as animals were vital assets whose well-being was directly tied to the family's survival. Simple domestic chores, sweeping the longhouse often with rudimentary brooms that kicked up dust, running errands within the settlement, assisting with food preparation like sorting grains or pounding dried fish, which was physically demanding even for small hands, or helping mend clothes in nets. These tasks, while seemingly minor, consumed significant portions of your day and were crucial for the smooth functioning of the household. As you grew older, perhaps by the age of 5 or 6, your responsibilities would increase dramatically. You would be expected to participate in more arduous tasks, your tiny body constantly working, straining, and learning through brute force and repetition. Field labour, depending on your strength and the season. You might join adults in the fields, helping with weeding a tedious, back-breaking task, stone clearing, hauling heavy rocks from newly ploughed areas, or collecting harvested crops. Your days would be spent under the relentless sun of summer, or in the biting cold of autumn, your back aching, performing repetitive tasks that were physically demanding even for full-grown adults. This early exposure to agricultural labour meant constant physical strain and little respite. Crafts and production. You might be taught specific crafts essential for the household or the settlement's economy, such as spinning wool into thread, a monotonous, hand-straining process, weaving simple cloths, preparing hides, often a smelly, messy, and physically demanding task, or assisting in the preparation of food for storage. These crafts involve long hours of repetitive motions, often in dim lighting, straining your young eyes and nimble fingers from a very early age, learning specialised trades. If you were destined to be a blacksmith, as explored in a previous episode about Viking blacksmiths. Chapter 1, your apprenticeship often began as a young boy, a shipbuilder, or a specialised artisan. Your training would begin very early. Your childhood would be consumed by grueling training, endless repetition, and often the threat of harsh discipline. Imagine being a young boy, spending hours pumping bellows in a hot, smoky forge, inhaling fumes, or learning to wield tools twice your weight, risking burns and injuries. It truly sucked to have your playtime replaced by work that could maim you. The discipline was harsh and uncompromising. Your parents, or your master if you were an apprentice or a thrall, would instill an unwavering work ethic and absolute obedience. Physical punishment was common, a sharp slap, a beating with a stick or rod, or a stern, humiliating reprimand for laziness, disobedience, a moment of inattention, or mistakes. This wasn't necessarily out of malice, but from a pragmatic necessity in a society where every individual's contribution was vital for survival, and where errors could have severe consequences for the entire household. You learned that showing weakness, crying, or complaining was not tolerated, and that your value was directly tied to your productivity and your ability to endure. It truly sucked to be beaten for being slow or tired. The lack of formal education as we understand it today for most children, particularly girls and those from common households, meant your learning was almost entirely practical, focused on survival skills and the specific demands of your future role. While some noble children might learn runes, poetry, or basic literacy and sagas might be recited in the longhouse, the vast majority of your knowledge would come from direct observation and hands-on experience, passed down orally and through direct, immersive participation in daily chores and crafts. Your school was the longhouse, the farm, the forge, and the wild world around you, relentlessly teaching you endurance, resilience, and self-reliance rather than abstract knowledge or leisurely intellectual pursuits. Your days were a continuous, exhausting lesson in sheer survival. The dangers of childhood labour were constant and often led to injuries or premature death. Accidents, working with crude tools, axes, knives, sickles, around open hearth, fires a constant danger in longhouses, or near unpredictable animals like horses or oxen meant a high risk of accidents. A slipped axe could gash a leg or inflict a fatal head wound, a burn from the hearth, a fall from a roof during repairs, or being kicked by a frightened animal could lead to severe injuries, broken bones, deep cuts, concussions that, without modern medical care, could result in permanent disability or, perhaps more often, death from infection. Imagine a simple fall causing a compound fracture, condemning your young self to a crippled future and a lifetime of pain in a world with no social safety net. Exposure. Performing chores outdoors in the harsh Scandinavian climate exposed you to extreme temperatures, risking severe frostbite in winter, leading to blackened, dead tissue, and the loss of fingers or toes or heat stroke in summer. Inadequate clothing, compounded by physical exertion, could lead to hypothermia or severe dehydration, silently claiming young lives. You would be constantly cold, constantly damp, or constantly overheated, your body battling the elements even during mundane tasks. Malnutrition. Despite constant work, your diet, as explored in why your daily food in the Viking Age utterly sucked, was often monotonous and nutritionally deficient. This chronic undernourishment, combined with intense physical exertion, weakened your body and made you highly susceptible to disease. A simple cold could quickly escalate into fatal pneumonia, and even minor cuts could fester into deadly infections, as your body lacked the resources to fight back. The psychological toll of this early, brutal labour was immense. Your childhood was systematically stolen, replaced by an unending cycle of demanding chores and physical discomfort. You learned to suppress cries of pain, to endure hardship without complaint, and to prioritise survival above all else. The constant fear of punishment, the pervasive physical exhaustion, and the immense pressure to contribute to your family's and settlement's survival would erode your spirit, leaving you a hardened, perhaps stoic, individual, far older than your chronological years. The concept of play was simply another form of training, meant to develop your physical capabilities and resilience, not to foster carefree joy or imaginative exploration. Your innocence was exchanged for endurance. Child thrall slaves, in particular, faced an even harsher reality. If you were born into slavery, or captured and enslaved at a young age during a raid, a common fate for defeated populations, your life was one of complete subjugation. Your labour was demanded without respite, your body owned by your master. Any compassion would be rare, and punishment even more brutal, exacerbating the already dire conditions faced by free children. Your childhood would be almost entirely consumed by relentless, uncompensated toil, with no hope of escape, no prospects for a better future. And often, no familial support beyond your immediate fellow thralls. Your very life was a commodity to be exploited until you broke. One common misconception is that all Viking children were simply miniature adults, fully integrated into the workforce without any concept of childhood. While their concept of childhood certainly differed from modern ones with earlier entry into labour and responsibility, archaeological findings and sagas do suggest a period of distinct development and learning, albeit one that was highly practical and often very demanding, preparing them for an adult life of hardship. The emphasis was on early independence, self-reliance, and direct contribution to the household's economy, often at the cost of formal education or extensive leisure. The high incidence of skeletal markers for stress and early trauma in children's remains confirms this grim reality. Historians still meticulously study archaeological findings from Viking Age children's burials e.g. bone growth patterns, signs of rickets, wear patterns on teeth consistent with early labour, and evidence of healed fractures from accidents, along with childhood activities mentioned in sagas e.g. training with bows, helping with farm work, learning crafts, and comparative anthropological studies of childhood in pre-industrial societies. To understand the precise nature of Viking childhood and the early demands placed upon children, consistently confirming the pervasive reality of early, brutal toil. Furthermore, the very concept of survival of the fittest applied ruthlessly to Viking childhood. Only the strongest, the most resilient, and the luckiest would make it through the gauntlet of early labour, disease, and accident to reach adulthood. Those who were weaker, less fortunate, or simply succumbed to the overwhelming demands were quietly absorbed into the high mortality statistics of the era. Their brief, brutal lives are testament to the unforgiving nature of the Viking Age, their potential, their dreams, all extinguished before they could even fully form. The psychological toll of living in a world where your vulnerability was so profound, where death could come swiftly from a myriad of sources: disease, accident, violence, and where your very existence was a constant struggle for mere sustenance, would be immense. You would grow up with a deep awareness of human frailty, the paramount importance of physical strength, and the constant need for vigilance. Your earliest lessons were in enduring hardship, not in exploring abstract concepts or personal joys. Your childhood, however short, taught you the brutal realities of survival, ensuring you were ready for the even harsher realities of adulthood. So, your earliest years in the Viking Age were defined by childhood's brutal toil and harsh realities, from hauling water and gathering firewood to working in the fields and learning demanding crafts. Your existence was consumed by relentless, often dangerous, physical labour, this profound exploitation of young bodies, ensuring your survival came at the cost of your innocence and well-being, was a defining, profoundly, horrifyingly, short aspect of your life in the Viking Age. Even as your young body was consumed by brutal toil, and your spirit was hardened by early responsibilities, your very existence as a Viking was a constant, desperate battle against the harsh landscape itself. Forget temperate climates and predictable seasons. The unforgiving environment, with its biting cold, unpredictable seas, and scarce resources, relentlessly chipped away at your life, making your existence profoundly horrifyingly short. Imagine your daily life in a Viking settlement, nestled precariously amidst rugged mountains, vast forests, or along a windswept coastline in Scandinavia. The natural world around you was not just your home, it was a formidable adversary, constantly testing your endurance and threatening your survival. Every breath you took, every step you made, was a negotiation with an environment that was both beautiful and utterly ruthless. The cold was a relentless, ever-present enemy, particularly during the long and dark winters. Temperatures would plummet far below, freezing for months on end, turning the landscape into a frozen wasteland. Your rough, woolen clothing, while providing some warmth, was often insufficient against the biting winds and sub-zero temperatures, every outdoor chore fetching water from ice-covered streams, tending to livestock in drafty shelters. Gathering scarce firewood became an agonizing test of endurance. Your breath would fog in the frigid air, and exposed skin would quickly turn numb, risking severe damage. Exposure and its terrifying toll. Prolonged exposure to these freezing temperatures, especially if you were wet or exhausted from labour, led to constant risk of hypothermia. Your body would shiver uncontrollably, your limbs would grow numb, and your core temperature would drop, leading to confusion, exhaustion, and often silent death during sleep. Imagine your fingers going stiff with cold, making it almost impossible to grip an oar or a tool, your body perpetually aching from the pervasive chill, your lips turning blue. It truly sucked to be perpetually frozen. Every winter a battle for warmth. Frostbite was a constant danger. Your exposed fingers, toes, nose, and ears were constantly at risk of freezing, where tissue would turn numb, then painfully white, then black. As cells died from lack of blood flow, this could lead to excruciating pain, permanent disfigurement, and the agonizing loss of digits, crippling you for life and rendering you unable to work effectively or even perform basic tasks. Imagine the horror of seeing a shipmate's toes turn black, knowing their future was one of limited function. It truly sucked to literally lose your digits to the cold. The frozen ground itself was a significant obstacle, permafrost, or ground that remained permanently frozen just beneath the surface in some northern areas, made basic tasks incredibly arduous. Digging graves, preparing fields for planting, or constructing buildings required immense effort, often involving thawing the ground layer by layer with fire, only to find the next layer still solid. This added immense physical strain to already demanding tasks, slowing progress and increasing exhaustion. The unpredictable, deadly sea. The sea, while a vital source of food and a pathway for raiding and trade, was equally unforgiving and unpredictable. You lived by the sea, and your livelihood depended on it, but it could claim your life in an instant. Violent storms were notorious in the northern seas. Imagine a sudden gale hitting your small fishing boat or a longship. The vessel would be tossed about like a toy, the wooden planks groaning, the single square sail shredding under the immense force of the wind. Waves, towering like mountains, would crash over your open deck, swamping the vessel, threatening to capsize you in an instant. You'd be desperately bailing water, clinging to the rigging, fighting for your life against the overwhelming power of the ocean. Many Vikings perished at sea, their bodies swallowed by the frigid waters, never to be seen again. It truly sucked to gamble your life against a rogue wave. Ice and fog were insidious killers, particularly on voyages to Iceland or Greenland, as explored in How Viking Explorers Really Survived the North Sea. Chapter 5. Dense fogs were common, reducing visibility to mere feet. This made navigation incredibly dangerous, increasing the risk of running aground on the hidden reefs or colliding with immense, silent icebergs. Vast expanses of sea ice could also trap a vessel for weeks or force long. Perilous detours that exhausted vital supplies, leaving your crew vulnerable to starvation and exposure. Imagine sailing for days in a blinding whiteout, utterly disoriented, convinced that a massive iceberg could appear out of the gloom at any moment, ready to crush your ship. Drowning was a constant peril, even without storms. A slip on an icy riverbank, a fall from a dock, or being knocked overboard from a longship during a rough passage could all lead to a swift, cold death, especially if laden with heavy woolen clothing that would drag you down. Your life was always just one misstep away from being extinguished by the frigid waters you lived by. Scarce resources. A land of limits. Scarce resources in the immediate environment added another layer of brutality to daily survival, forcing relentless effort and constant anxiety. Limited arable land. Much of Scandinavia was mountainous, heavily forested, or consisted of barren coastlines, severely limiting the amount of fertile land available for extensive farming. This meant reliance on hardy grains and animal husbandry was paramount, but agricultural yields were often low, leading to constant anxiety about food security, as explored in Why Your Daily Food in the Viking Age Utterly Sucked. Wood scarcity in some areas. While Scandinavia generally had forests, specific settlements, particularly in more remote or newly colonized areas like Iceland or Greenland, faced severe timber scarcity. This meant vital wood for building longhouses, ships, tools, and crucially, fuel for heating and cooking had to be carefully managed. Collected from driftwood, a dangerous task on icy coasts, or imported from perilous voyages at immense cost. This constant struggle for wood added significant burden to daily life. Lack of diverse food sources. The harsh climate often limited the variety of wild fruits and vegetables available, especially in winter. This meant your diet was often monotonous and nutritionally deficient, exacerbating your vulnerability to cold and disease, making you perpetually reliant on staples like dried fish and coarse grains. Wild animals, unseen and visible threats. The wild animals of the landscape also posed a tangible, if less frequent, threat, demanding constant vigilance while rarely attacking large, armed groups. Lone travellers, children, or weakened individuals could fall prey to wolves, bears, or wild boars in dense forests or remote mountainous regions. Venomous snakes and scorpions, though less common in the colder north, could still pose a threat in specific environments. Imagine venturing alone into the dense, dark woods to gather firewood, always listening for the rustle of unseen predators, or the snap of a twig that might betray the presence of a lurking danger. It really sucked to share your backyard with literal monsters. Unpredictability. Fate's cruel hand. The unpredictability of these natural phenomena was a constant source of stress and terror. A sudden, unseasonal blizzard in the mountains, an unexpected early frost that ruined the autumn harvest, or a violent storm that appeared out of nowhere to capsize your longship. These natural disasters could strike without warning, wiping out entire families or communities, often attributed to the unpredictable wrath of the gods as explored in the horrifying superstitions that controlled a Viking's daily life. This profound lack of control over your environment, this constant awareness of unforeseen natural catastrophes, added another layer of profound anxiety to your already brutal existence. Your life was a series of unpredictable gambles with an indifferent, or actively malevolent, cosmos. Psychological toll, hardened by nature's embrace. The psychological toll of constantly battling nature's fury would be immense. You would live with perpetual anxiety, always scanning the sky for signs of storms, the landscape for signs of danger, and the sea for signs of peril, the endless cold, the fear of starvation, the constant threat of being lost or injured in the wilderness would erode your spirit, leaving you perpetually fatigued, stoic, and perhaps even fatalistic. You were perpetually struggling for mere survival against forces far more powerful than yourself, making your life a continuous, grueling test of endurance. Your identity was forged in this constant battle, a testament to your resilience but also to your unending suffering, a profound acceptance of nature's brutal terms. One common misconception is that Viking people, being so rugged, were somehow immune to the effects of extreme weather or natural disasters. In reality, while their cultures developed remarkable adaptations, longhouse design, shipbuilding, food preservation, they were still profoundly vulnerable. Archaeological findings, sagas, and historical records consistently show mass casualties from famines, severe winters, and maritime disasters, demonstrating that nature remained a dominant, often deadly, force in their lives. The Norse sagas often feature detailed descriptions of such environmental hardships, underscoring their devastating impact on human lives and communities. Serving as grim cautionary tales, historians still meticulously study paleoclimatic data from ice cores, tree rings, and sediment samples, alongside archaeological evidence, and settlement patterns, longhouse construction methods, and animal bone analysis in Old Norse sagas, to understand the precise interaction between Viking societies and their environment, consistently confirming the profound, often deadly, challenges posed by the natural landscape. Furthermore, the limited technological means to mitigate these threats exacerbated your vulnerability. Your boats, while magnificent, were at the mercy of the elements. Your homes, while insulated, were not perfectly warm. Your tools, while effective, were no match for a sudden blizzard or a devastating landslide. This reliance on rudimentary technology meant that your survival was often a matter of immense resilience and sheer luck, rather than systematic control over your environment. The very landscape, raw and untamed, mirrored the inherent danger of your existence, ensuring that your life was a continuous, harrowing ordeal. The impact on community life was also profound. When a storm wiped out a fishing fleet, or a harsh winter claimed too many livestock, the entire settlement suffered. These shared struggles, while fostering powerful communal bonds, also highlighted the collective vulnerability to nature's wrath, ensuring that even in solidarity, the pervasive fear of the landscape remained. Your life was a constant collective battle, fought with limited resources against an overwhelming adversary, often leading to profound losses that reshaped the community itself. The presence of glaciers in places like Greenland, as explored in What Sucked About Being a Viking Settler in Greenland, even if distant, also reminded you of the immense, cold power of the natural world, a force that could expand and reclaim land, slowly but inexorably. This visual reminder of nature's ultimate dominance added another layer of subtle dread to your life, particularly as the climate began to cool in later centuries. So, your daily life in the Viking Age was inextricably linked to the relentless, unforgiving assault of the harsh landscape itself, the biting cold, the pervasive permafrost, the unpredictable seas, the lurking wild animals, and the constant threats from the wilderness all combined to make every moment a battle for survival against the untamed forces of nature. This pervasive environmental hostility, ensuring every season brought its own unique torments, was a defining, profoundly horrifyingly short aspect of your life, ensuring your existence was a continuous struggle against an omnipresent, often deadly, natural world, even as your hardy body was forged by the harsh landscape and your spirit steeled by early responsibilities. Your life in the Viking Age was relentlessly chipped away by another pervasive and insidious enemy disease. Forget miraculous recoveries, widespread illness, rampant infections, and the utter helplessness of ancient medicine ensured your existence was profoundly, horrifyingly short. Imagine the constant, gnawing anxiety that would settle over you with every cough from a longhouse mate, every sudden fever among your family, or every ache in your own body. In the Viking Age, illness was not an exception, it was a daily reality, claiming countless lives, often more than battles or raids. Your body, perpetually under stress from hard labour, poor diet, and environmental extremes, had a severely compromised immune system. Your defences were utterly depleted, leaving you a prime target for every pathogen circulating in your community. This biological vulnerability, born of hardship, meant your body simply couldn't fight back effectively. It truly sucked to be perpetually vulnerable to invisible killers. The sources of illness were manifold and constantly present in your daily life. Infectious diseases, the silent scourge of settlements. This was by far the primary killer, especially for infants and young children as explored in Chapter 1, but also for adults. Viking longhouses, while providing essential shelter from the elements, were often cramped, poorly ventilated, and shared with livestock during colder months for warmth and security. This close proximity of humans and animals, combined with rudimentary sanitation and human and animal waste, often accumulated near dwellings or in middens. Large trash heaps created ideal breeding grounds for contagion. Diseases like smallpox, measles, Influenza, diphtheria, whooping cough, and various fevers would sweep through communities with terrifying speed and lethality. Imagine your longhouse filled with the sounds of hacking coughs, the groans of the fevered, and the mournful wails for the recently departed. You would witness your neighbours, your friends, and even members of your own family succumb rapidly to agonizing illnesses, their bodies wasting away, knowing there was nothing truly effective to save them, only prayers and desperate folk remedies. It truly sucked to watch everyone die around you from unknown causes. Waterborne diseases, a gamble with every sip your water sources, whether from wells, streams, or rivers, were frequently contaminated by human and animal waste from nearby settlements or agricultural runoff. Without any understanding of microbiology, the concept of invisible germs was millennia away. You would drink this suspect water daily, unknowingly exposing yourself to deadly pathogens. This led to rampant dysentery, often called the bloody flux, causing severe diarrhea, agonizing abdominal cramps, and rapid dehydration, typhoid fever, and various parasitic infections like giardiasis or roundworms, which would constantly sap your strength and nutrients. Imagine your body racked by cramps and relentless purging, rapidly dehydrating, knowing every sip of murky, foul-smelling water might bring you closer to a painful, undignified end. It truly sucked to be thirsty but fear the water. Respiratory illnesses, choking on the cold and smoke. The harsh Scandinavian climate, with its long, cold, and damp winters, combined with pervasive smoke, inhalation from indoor fires. Many longhouses had central hearths with poor chimney systems. Filling the air with soot and fumes made respiratory ailments chronic. Colds would swiftly escalate into severe bronchitis, pneumonia, or pleurisy, inflammation of the lung lining, especially in bodies weakened by cold and malnutrition. Your lungs were perpetually battling the elements and the indoor air pollution, leading to constant coughing and laboured breathing that would only worsen with age. Imagine the constant, burning ache in your chest, knowing every breath was a struggle against the very air in your home. It truly sucked to literally choke on your own longhouse's air. Nutritional deficiencies, the body's slow betrayal. As explored in previous chapters, why your daily food in the Viking Age utterly sucked. Your diet was often monotonous, heavily reliant on grains, and severely lacking in diverse fresh fruits and vegetables. This led to rampant scurvy, vitamin C deficiency, causing bleeding gums, loose teeth, and open wounds, anemia, iron deficiency, leading to chronic fatigue and weakness, and various other deficiencies that compounded your overall physical weakness and compromised your immune system. Your body was constantly fighting a hidden hunger, slowly breaking down from within. Even if you weren't actively starving, this internal erosion made you incredibly vulnerable to every passing disease, ensuring that a healthy recovery was always an uphill battle. It truly sucked to literally rot from the inside out due to your diet. Dental infections, a mouthful of death. The pervasive dental problems in the Viking Age is explored in The Brutal Reality of Medieval Dentistry. Chapter 8. Caused by abrasive diets and lack of hygiene, frequently led to painful abscesses, pus-filled infections and severe oral infections. These localized infections could easily spread to the bloodstream, causing sepsis, blood poisoning, meningitis, brain infection, or other life-threatening complications, leading to agonizing death. Your mouth was a constant source of potential lethal infection, silently threatening your entire body. Imagine a throbbing toothache escalating into a raging fever and convulsions, knowing it might be your end. It truly sucked to literally die from a tooth. Primitive medical knowledge, helplessness against the unseen medical knowledge and care, were tragically primitive. Viking Age society had its healers, the Leknar physicians, often skilled in herbal remedies and basic wound care, and the Volur wise women, who offered spiritual healing and divination. However, their understanding of disease causation was rooted in folklore, superstition, and empirical observation, not science. They had no concept of germ theory, no antibiotics, no understanding of how to treat systemic infections, and no sterile surgical environments. Herbal remedies. While some herbs possessed genuine medicinal properties, their efficacy was inconsistent, and they were often combined with unproven or even harmful ingredients. You might apply a poultice of herbs to a festering wound, hoping it would work, but knowing it often failed, or even exacerbated the infection. Surgical intervention, basic surgeries like setting broken bones or amputations might be attempted, but these were crude, agonizing procedures performed without effective anesthesia, and the overwhelming risk of post-operative infection sepsis. Tetanus made them incredibly dangerous. Many who survived the initial trauma of injury or surgery succumbed days or weeks later to the infections they contracted during treatment. Ironically killed by the cure, spiritual cures prayers, charms, and rituals to appease angry gods or malevolent spirits, as explored in the horrifying superstitions that controlled a Viking's daily life. Chapter 9 were commonly employed, offering psychological comfort but no physiological defense against virulent pathogens. Your faith was your solace, but not your cure. If you fell severely ill, your survival depended entirely on your body's own brute resilience and immense, terrifying luck. Many resorted to desperate folk remedies, sometimes harmful, in a futile attempt to cling to life, only prolonging their agony. It truly sucked to be a patient in the Viking Age, where hope was often futile. High mortality rates death's pervasive presence. The mortality rate was consistently high throughout the Viking Age, and disease was by far the leading cause of death for all ages, but particularly for infants and young children, as explored in Chapter 1. You would constantly witness illness sweeping through your longhouse, your village or your raiding party, the sight of emaciated bodies racked by fever, the smell of sickness, and the pervasive sounds of suffering would be a constant, harrowing reality. Your own existence was a perpetual struggle against unseen enemies, turning your home into a place of constant fear and misery, knowing death was always a breath away. It truly sucked to watch everyone die around you. Psychological toll: fear, despair, and resignation. The psychological toll of constantly battling sickness, of watching your loved ones suffer and die from agonizing diseases that you could neither understand nor cure, would be immense. This pervasive atmosphere of illness and death eroded morale, fostered despair, and made every day a grim countdown to the inevitable. The fear of contagion, the helplessness in the face of an epidemic, and the knowledge that your body was always at risk would leave deep, indelible scars on your psyche. This continuous exposure to suffering, this brutal reality of life constantly threatened by unseen killers, made Viking existence a profound and horrifying battle, often leading to a fatalistic resignation. It truly sucked to be perpetually scared of getting sick. Archaeological evidence. A grim confirmation. One common misconception is that Viking Age people, being hardy and living in a relatively clean, cold environment, were healthier than other medieval populations. In reality, while they were undoubtedly resilient, their overall health was significantly worse than today, and their lifespans drastically shorter, precisely due to the prevalence of infectious diseases, malnutrition, and limited medical knowledge. Archaeological studies of Viking Age skeletal remains from various sites, e.g. burial grounds in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and settlements in Greenland or Iceland consistently show widespread evidence of chronic infectious diseases, such as osteomyelitis, bone infections often secondary to dental or wound infections, tuberculosis, leprosy in some areas, and syphilis from the late Viking Age onwards in some regions. These findings, combined with evidence of severe nutritional deficiencies, scurvy, anemia, rickets and extensive dental pathologies, cavities, abscesses, severe wear, and bone infections directly contradict romanticised notions of Viking health and confirm the devastating impact of pervasive disease on their lifespan. Historians and bioarchaeologists still meticulously study these osteological records, a.g. microscopic analysis of bone growth patterns, signs of stress, and lesions, and compare them with demographic inferences from sagas and textual accounts to paint a comprehensive, and often grim, picture of Viking Age health for all segments of the population. Lack of public health, isolated vulnerability. The lack of public health infrastructure and organised medical responses like widespread hospitals or quarantine measures meant that once a disease outbreak began, it often swept through entire settlements without hindrance. You were utterly reliant on your own family's resilience and the basic, often ineffective, knowledge of local healers. This inherent vulnerability made every illness a profound personal and communal crisis, ensuring that disease remained a silent, ever-present, and brutally efficient killer, often transforming longhouses into death traps. The cumulative toll, a short, hard life. The cumulative effect of chronic illness and infection over a lifetime was a significantly shortened lifespan, even if you escaped violent death from warfare or accidents. The slow, insidious decay of your body from within, caused by constant microbial assault and nutritional deficiencies, would inevitably lead to a premature demise. Your body was perpetually under siege, its resources depleted, leaving you highly susceptible to any number of fatal illnesses that a healthy, well-nourished body could easily fight off today. Your life was a testament to endurance, but rarely to vitality or comfortable longevity. The constant battle against a body slowly consumed by disease ensured a quick end. So, your life in the Viking Age was defined by the pervasive and often terrifying reality of disease's scourge, invisible killers like scurvy, dysentery, sepsis, and various fevers, exacerbated by unsanitary conditions, poor diet, and harsh exposure on land and sea, claimed more lives than any other danger. This pervasive threat, ensuring your body was perpetually vulnerable and often consumed by agonizing illness, was a defining, profoundly, horrifyingly, short aspect of your life in the Viking Age, ensuring that your survival was a continuous battle against unseen, merciless killers. Having battled the terrifying realities of war and the pervasive threat of disease, your daily life in the Viking Age was relentlessly punctuated by another, more overt and terrifying threat: war and raids. Forget peaceful farming or quiet family life. The constant threat of violent death, whether in battle, ambush, or during a raid, meant every conflict was a gamble, making your existence profoundly horrifyingly short. Imagine the pervasive sense of unease that hung over your settlement. The Viking Age, roughly 793 to 1066 CE, was a period characterized by widespread raids, warfare, and conquest across Europe. Whether you were a farmer, a thrall, or even a warrior, your life was inextricably linked to this pervasive culture of violence. You were never truly safe from its reach, and a violent end was a constant, looming possibility. You might experience brief periods of peace, but these were often merely lulls before the next storm, the next call to arms, or the next sighting of a dragon-headed longship on the horizon. It truly sucked to be perpetually on edge, knowing death could come from any direction. Your direct involvement in violence would depend on your social status and gender. Male warrior's life on the blade's edge. If you were a free male, you were expected to be a warrior Viking, ready to participate in raids, Viking, or defend your lands. This was not a hobby. It was a fundamental aspect of male identity and civic duty. You would be called upon by your Jarl chieftain or Conunga king to join expeditions, whether for plunder, conquest, settlement, or defence. This meant participating in brutal, often hand-to-hand, combat, a terrifying reality that defined much of your adult life. Naval combat. Being part of a longship crew meant facing fierce naval battles. You would row furiously, then engage in close-quarters combat on the decks of the ships. Oarsmen and warriors would clash on the decks, using axes, swords, and spears. The chaos of a sea battle, the danger of being drowned by a capsized ship or impaled by a spear, was immense. Your longship, while a powerful vessel, could be sunk by a storm or overwhelmed by a larger, more heavily armed force. Land battles. Whether raiding abroad or defending your lands at home, Viking battles were brutal, often short, but incredibly intense affairs. The shield wall formation, a tightly packed line of warriors with overlapping shields, would clash. Axes would bite deep into flesh, and swords would cleave bone. There was little mercy shown, and quarter was rarely given, especially in the heat of battle. Injuries were horrific, and death often came swiftly and brutally, reducing a proud warrior to a lifeless corpse in the mud. Imagine the sheer terror of standing shoulder to shoulder in a shield wall, feeling the impact of a charging enemy, hearing the screams of the wounded, and knowing that your life could end in the next swing of an axe. It truly sucked to literally put your body on the line for inches of ground. Ambush's violence wasn't limited to pitched battles. Your raiding party or travelling group could be ambushed on a foreign coastline, in dense forests, or on a winding river. Surprise attacks were common, turning a peaceful journey into a sudden, terrifying fight for survival. Civilians, farmers, thralls, women, children caught in the crossfire. Even if you were not a warrior by trade, your life was still profoundly affected by warfare. Your village could be the constant target of raids from rival Viking groups, from foreign invaders like Anglo-Saxons or Franks seeking revenge, or from other raiding parties seeking plunder or new thralls. Imagine waking to the terrifying sound of dragon-headed longships appearing on the horizon, their sails billowing ominously, or the shouts of a raiding party attacking your settlement in the dead of night. You would scramble desperately to defend your home, or flee with your family to the often flimsy safety of a nearby fortified stronghold or dense forest. But often, resistance was futile against a determined, armed force. Slaughter and plunder. Raiding parties would steal your livestock, burn your longhouses to the ground, and seize your precious possessions, leaving your family destitute. You might witness your family members, your parents, your spouse, your children killed directly in the violence, or subjected to brutal atrocities by the raiders. The very survival of your community could be extinguished in a single, devastating raid, leaving behind only smoking ruins and unburied dead. Enslavement thrall. If captured during a raid, you might be dragged away in chains, your freedom utterly stripped away, destined for a brutal life as a thrall slave in a distant land, serving a new master in harsh conditions. This was a common fate for the defeated, turning men, women and children into commodities. Imagine being torn from your home and family, forced onto a longship, and sailing towards an unknown future of relentless toil and degradation. Your dignity utterly destroyed. Indirect hardship. Even if you escaped direct violence, warfare brought immense hardship. Fields might be left untended due to conscription, trade routes might be disrupted, and essential resources could become scarce. This caused famine and economic devastation that affected all members of society, whether they carried a weapon or not. The constant threat, a pervasive reality. The risk of violent death was incredibly high for all segments of the Viking Age population, not just warriors. While a warrior might seek a glorious death in battle to reach Valhalla, a common farmer, a thrall, a woman, or a child might perish violently and ignominiously, their body left unburied or unmourned, their fate unremembered in any saga. Death could come swiftly from a blade, a spear, an arrow, or simply from being caught in the chaos of a burning village, crushed underfoot, or falling into a river during a desperate flight. No one was truly safe from its pervasive reach. The frequency of conflict meant you were rarely truly at peace. Raids, feuds, and localized skirmishes were common, not just between Vikings and foreign lands, but also between rival jarls within Scandinavia, or between Norse settlers and indigenous peoples in newly colonized lands like in Greenland. As explored in What Sucked About Being a Viking Settler in Greenland. Chapter 6. This pervasive culture of violence ensured that your life was constantly overshadowed by the threat of armed conflict, turning every journey, every planting season, every moment of supposed calm into a period of anxious vigilance. It truly sucked to live in a perpetual state of war, even when no one was actively fighting. Medical incapacity, wounds and agony. The lack of effective medical care for battle wounds exacerbated the lethality of combat. A sword cut, a spear thrust, or an axe wound could lead to severe blood loss, shattered bones, and debilitating internal injuries. Without modern antiseptics, antibiotics, or complex surgical techniques, even a non-fatal injury could quickly become infected, leading to agonizing death from sepsis, blood poisoning, gangrene putrefaction of tissue, or tetanus lockjaw. From soil bacteria entering wounds days or weeks later, many warriors who survived the initial battle succumbed to their wounds in agonizing pain. Far from the battlefield, your best hope, if severely wounded, was often a swift death, as prolonged suffering from an injury often led to a more brutal and prolonged end. It really sucked to survive getting stabbed only to die from a germ. Psychological toll, hardening and despair. The psychological toll of living in a society defined by constant warfare and raiding would be immense. You would live with a perpetual sense of anxiety, always vigilant for threats, always fearing a raid that could burn your home, kill your family, or drag you into slavery. The sight of your loved ones or neighbours suffering violence, the pervasive presence of death, and the grim necessity of inflicting violence yourself if you were a warrior would leave deep, indelible scars on your psyche. This constant exposure to brutality would desensitize you, but also lead to nightmares, paranoia, and a profound sense of insecurity, shaping your worldview into one of harsh realism and constant struggle. Your spirit would be hardened, yet perpetually haunted by the spectre of violence. The concept of vengeance blot also played a significant role, often leading to cycles of violence that extended beyond initial conflicts. If a family member was killed or dishonoured, your family or clan would be obligated by custom to seek retribution, drawing you into feuds that could last for generations, ensuring that peace was often temporary and violence could erupt at any moment, even over old grievances. This cultural emphasis on honour and retribution often meant that past conflicts directly dictated future violence, perpetuating a cycle of instability and bloodshed. The grim reality. Uncelebrated casualties. One common misconception is that all Viking Age deaths in battle were glorious and led to Valhalla. While the ideal of a glorious death was paramount for many warriors, as explored in What a Disturbing Viking Funeral for a Chieftain was like. Chapter 8, regarding Valhalla. The reality was that many died ignominiously from infection, accidents, or by being overwhelmed, regardless of their bravery. Furthermore, non-warriors and civilians, farmers, thralls, women, children were frequent, uncelebrated casualties of raids, and their deaths were often brutal and uncommemorated, highlighting the pervasive and indiscriminate nature of violence in the Viking Age. The sagas, while focusing on heroes, often implicitly reveal the devastating impact on the common folk. Archaeological findings from Viking Age burial sites, including mass graves or graves showing signs of violence, specific cut marks on bones, embedded weapon fragments consistently illustrate the grim reality of widespread violent death for all segments of the population. Historians still meticulously study osteological analysis of human remains looking for signs of perimortem trauma, healed and unhealed battle wounds, and evidence of execution in sagas, archaeological reports of specific raids or battles to understand the precise prevalence and mechanisms of violent death in the Viking Age. Furthermore, the lack of centralised state protection in many areas meant you were often entirely reliant on your own community's strength, or your jarl's ability to defend his lands. There was no vast standing army to protect every village. Local defence was paramount, and if your community was too small or too weak, you were vulnerable to anyone who sought to take what little you had. This regional vulnerability meant that your safety was always precarious, dependent on local power dynamics and the constant vigilance of your own people, ensuring that even your home was a potential battleground. The very concept of peace was fleeting, even in the times when no major wars were being fought. Local feuds, individual acts of violence, and the ever-present threat of a new raiding season meant that true tranquility was a rare luxury. Your life was shaped by this pervasive violence, its shadow extending over every aspect of your existence. So, your life in the Viking Age was defined by the pervasive and terrifying reality of war and raids, the constant threat of violent death, whether in brutal battle, sudden ambush, or devastating raid, coupled with the lack of effective medical care for wounds and the inherent dangers of a society constantly on the brink of conflict. Ensured that every day was a gamble. This pervasive culture of violence, claiming lives indiscriminately, was a defining, profoundly horrifyingly short aspect of your life in the Viking Age, ensuring that your existence was a perpetual struggle against overt and brutal aggression, even as you faced the terrifying realities of war and the pervasive threat of disease. Your daily life in the Viking Age was relentlessly punctuated by other, more mundane, yet equally deadly, dangers. Forget safe environments and emergency services, accidents and injuries were a constant peril, from farming mishaps to domestic misfortunes, often leading to agonizing death, making your existence profoundly horrifyingly short. Imagine the pervasive sense of precariousness that accompanied every daily task. Your world was built on manual labour, crude tools, and an unforgiving environment, where a single misstep or a moment of inattention could have devastating consequences for your life and livelihood. You were constantly surrounded by potential hazards, both at home and at work, ensuring that even a peaceful day could turn deadly in an instant. It truly sucked to have your daily routine be a death trap. The dangers of agricultural labour were immense. If you were a farmer, your life revolved around the land, and the tools you used were inherently dangerous. Tools of parallaxes, sickles, and ploughs, axes and sickles used for felling trees, chopping wood, clearing land, and harvesting crops. A slipped axe could sever a limb or inflict a fatal head wound. A dull sickle, used with immense force, could cause deep, gaping cuts that would bleed profusely and become easily infected. Imagine the sheer strength required to swing an axe all day, your muscles burning, knowing that a single miscalculation could result in a crippling injury or instant death. Ploughs and harrows pulled by oxen or horses, these heavy, unwieldy implements could cause crushing injuries if you stumbled or were caught in their path. A moment's inattention and you could be dragged, your body severely damaged by the heavy farming equipment. Threshing. The process of separating grain from stalks involved flails, heavy wooden tools, or trampling by animals. This was a dusty, physically demanding activity where accidental blows from a flail or dust inhalation could cause severe injury or chronic respiratory problems. Livestock animals, even domesticated ones, were unpredictable and could pose a direct threat. A sudden kick from a horse, a goring from an ox, or a bite from a dog could inflict serious wounds, leading to infection or internal damage. Imagine trying to control a frightened animal during a storm, risking a kick that could shatter your leg, or a headbutt that could break your ribs. Domestic dangers half, home, and unseen perils. Domestic accidents were equally common and often fatal, especially within the confines of the longhouse, where daily life blended with inherent dangers. Open hearths. The central fire in your longhouse was essential for heat and cooking, but it was also a constant danger. Children or adults could stumble or fall into it, suffering severe burns that, without modern medical care, would quickly become infected and likely prove fatal. Imagine the agonizing pain of third-degree burns, your flesh charred, knowing only infection and a slow, agonizing death awaited. Falling objects. Longhouses had open rafters, often used for storage. Tools, weapons, heavy hides, or other items could fall unexpectedly, causing head injuries, broken bones, or crushing blows to anyone below. Building collapses. Older, less stable longhouses, especially those made of turf and timber, could suffer partial collapses during severe storms, heavy snowfalls, or if poorly maintained, trapping or crushing inhabitants within. The ground itself, if unstable, could give way. Drowning. Proximity to rivers, lakes, or the sea meant a constant risk of drowning, especially for children who played near the water or for adults during fishing or transport. Slips on icy banks, falls from the crude docks, or capsizing of small boats could lead to swift, cold death. Imagine yourself or a loved one falling into frigid water, unable to swim, their heavy woolen clothes dragging them down to the bottom of the fjord or river. It truly sucked to drown in your own backyard. Fires. While longhouses were built with timber and turf, the constant use of open fires for cooking and heating, combined with flammable materials like straw bedding and dried goods, meant that accidental fires were a persistent threat. A dropped ember, a faulty hearth, or a lightning strike could quickly engulf an entire longhouse or even sections of a settlement, leading to death by smoke, inhalation, or severe burns, and the loss of your entire home and possessions. The medical abyss. Injuries beyond hope. The lack of effective medical care meant that even seemingly minor accidents could quickly escalate into life-threatening emergencies. A deep cut from an axe, a sprained ankle from uneven terrain, or a severe burn from the hearth, if left untreated or improperly treated, could rapidly fester into a deadly infection. Without antiseptics, antibiotics, or modern surgical techniques, infection was almost guaranteed. This could lead to gangrene, the putrefaction of tissue, leading to amputation or death. Tetanus lockjaw, from soil bacteria entering wounds, causing agonizing spasms and death, or fatal sepsis, blood poisoning. A systemic infection that would cause organ failure and agonizing death. Many who survive the initial trauma of an accident succumb days or weeks later to infections that would be easily treatable today. Imagine a simple cut from a splinter, if infected, turning into a swollen, blackening limb, knowing it was slowly killing you. It really sucked to literally have a splinter kill you. Bone fractures were common and often resulted in permanent disability. A broken arm or leg, sustained from a fall or an agricultural accident, would be set with crude splints made of wood and bandages, often without precise alignment. The healing process would be agonizingly slow, and frequently result in permanent deformities, chronic pain, or limited mobility, rendering you unable to work effectively and thus a burden on your family. Your body, once strong and capable, would be forever marked by the imperfect healing of past accidents, a living testament to the brutal realities of ancient medicine. Psychological scars. Living on the brink. The psychological toll of constantly living with such pervasive dangers would be immense. You would live with a constant sense of precariousness, always aware that a simple daily task could lead to a severe injury or death. The sight of your neighbours or family members suffering from crippling accidents, or dying from infections caused by seemingly minor wounds, would be a constant, chilling reminder of your own vulnerability. This pervasive fear, this knowledge that death lurked in every corner of your daily life, from the field to the hearth, would erode your peace of mind, leading to a profound sense of anxiety and helplessness. Your existence was a perpetual struggle against the mundane dangers of your own environment, an unending vigilance that left you perpetually on edge. It truly sucked to be perpetually afraid of your own life. Historical reality, deaths beyond battle. One common misconception is that Viking Age people, being so rugged and outdoorsy, were immune to common accidents, or that most deaths were from battle. In reality, while they were incredibly resilient, their reliance on manual labour, crude tools, and living in an unforgiving environment meant that accidents were a pervasive and often deadly part of daily life, frequently claiming more lives than warfare. Archaeological studies of Viking Age skeletal remains from various sites, burial grounds in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and settlements in Iceland or Greenland consistently show a high incidence of healed fractures, some clearly misaligned, evidence of head trauma, and signs of chronic infections that likely resulted from daily accidents, confirming the physical toll of their demanding lifestyle. These findings, often alongside evidence of perimortems at or near time of death, trauma from violence, paint a comprehensive picture of a society where physical hardship was endemic. Historians and bioarchaeologists still meticulously study these osteological records to reconstruct the precise types and frequency of injuries suffered by Vikings in their daily lives, separate from battle wounds, often finding significant evidence of a life fraught with accidental peril, lack of safety nets, no rescue, no recourse furthermore. The lack of any emergency services or immediate medical response exacerbated the lethality of accidents. If you suffered a severe injury in your longhouse or in a field, there was no ambulance, no nearby clinic. Your survival depended entirely on the immediate actions of your family or neighbours, their willingness to provide rudimentary and often ineffective care, and your body's own brute resilience. This profound self-reliance, while a hallmark of Viking life, also meant that many died from injuries that would be easily treatable today, simply due to lack of immediate professional intervention. Your fate was often sealed by the absence of a skilled hand or proper medicine. The sheer dehumanization of living in a world where accidents could claim your life so arbitrarily, without warning, and with such devastating consequences, cannot be overstated. You were a tool for survival, a vital cog in the household's economy, and if you broke, you were simply replaced by others. If the family could even find a replacement, your pain and your suffering from an accident were personal, but your ultimate fate was often determined by the grim efficiency of an indifferent system and an unforgiving environment. The impact on family life was also immense. A family member disabled by an accident meant lost labour, plunging the household into greater hardship and potentially threatening its survival. If a parent died from an accident, their children might be orphaned and left vulnerable in a harsh society. The constant worry about accidents, the visible scars of past injuries on your neighbours, and the grim reality of such an arbitrary end shaped your daily life and your understanding of mortality. Your existence was a continuous calculation of risk and reward, with your life often being the ultimate cost. So, your life in the Viking Age was consumed by the pervasive and often terrifying reality of accidents and injuries, from farming mishaps and domestic dangers to falls and workplace perils. Your existence was defined by constant, often mundane, yet equally deadly risks. This pervasive threat, ensuring your short life could be extinguished or permanently crippled by a single misstep, was a defining, profoundly horrifyingly short aspect of your daily existence, ensuring that every moment was a gamble against unforeseen dangers. even as your body wasted away from malnutrition and your spirit battled constant illness. Your life in the Viking Age was relentlessly chipped away by another insidious, yet fundamental. Adversary malnutrition's slow decay. Forget balanced meals or consistent nutrition. Your monotonous, often deficient diet slowly eroded your body, drastically shortening your lifespan, and making your very existence profoundly horrifyingly short. Imagine the constant, gnawing anxiety that would settle over you with every cough from a longhouse mate, every sudden fever among your family, or every ache in your own body. In the Viking Age, illness was not an exception, it was a daily reality, claiming countless lives, often more than battles or raids. Your body, perpetually under stress from hard labour, poor diet, and environmental extremes, had a severely compromised immune system. Your defences were utterly depleted, leaving you a prime target for every pathogen circulating in your community. This biological vulnerability, born of hardship, meant your body simply couldn't fight back effectively. It truly sucked to be perpetually vulnerable to invisible killers. The sources of illness were manifold and constantly present in your daily life. Scurvy, the agony of internal decay. Scurvy, vitamin C deficiency. This was perhaps the most common and agonizing killer for Vikings, particularly during long sea voyages or the lean winter months when fresh produce was non-existent, as explored in Why Your Daily Food in the Viking Age Utterly Sucked. Chapter 4. Without any fresh fruits like berries or apples or vegetables, your body would slowly, agonizingly, break down. Imagine your gums bleeding profusely, turning black, your teeth loosening and eventually falling out from their sockets. Old wounds, even minor scars from childhood accidents or past battles, would reopen and refuse to heal, oozing pus and blood. Your limbs would swell painfully, often turning purple and black with internal hemorrhages. Your joints would ache with every movement, and you would suffer from profound, debilitating fatigue, your body literally disintegrating from the inside out. Scurvy was a slow, agonizing death, a pervasive misery that could incapacitate an entire crew or village, turning a powerful warrior into a helpless, suffering wreck. It truly sucked to literally rot from the inside out because you couldn't get an orange. Anemia, perpetual weakness, anemia, iron deficiency. The severe scarcity of red meat is explored in Why Your Daily Food in the Viking Age Utterly Sucked. Chapter 2 in Fresh Greens. Combined with a diet high in grain which contains phytates that inhibit iron absorption, would lead to widespread anemia. Imagine chronic fatigue that left you constantly exhausted, profound weakness that made demanding physical labour even more arduous, dizziness and shortness of breath from even minor exertion. Your skin would be pale and sallow, your lips and fingernail beds lacking colour, and your body's ability to carry oxygen would be severely compromised, leaving you constantly drained and susceptible to other illnesses. This constant exhaustion, not from lack of sleep but from lack of vital blood, was a pervasive and unseen torment. It truly sucked to feel perpetually drained, like a living ghost. Rickets-bowed bones and stunted growth rickets, vitamin D deficiency, while Vikings had some sun exposure, particularly in summer, and consumed fish oil as a source of vitamin D, as explored in Why Your Daily Food in the Viking Age Utterly Sucked. Chapter 4. The long dark winters, particularly in more northern latitudes like Norway or Iceland, coupled with limited dietary sources, meant many children and adults, as osteomalacia suffered from rickets. This would lead to soft, deformed bones, particularly in the legs, bowed legs, stunted growth, and increased susceptibility to fractures. Imagine your children's limbs subtly bowing, their bones aching, leaving them permanently disfigured or in pain, and perhaps unable to perform the demanding physical labour required for survival. Your overall stature might be stunted if you suffered from childhood deficiencies, a permanent mark of your nutritional struggles. It truly sucked to have your body literally warped by your diet, protein and other deficiencies. The silent undermining protein deficiency, despite reliance on fish and dairy, inconsistent access to high-quality protein, especially complete proteins from meat, would lead to muscle wasting, overall weakness, impaired growth in children, and difficulty for adults to repair tissues and maintain muscle mass. Your body, perpetually engaged in demanding physical labour, would struggle to build and maintain the strength it needed for farming, crafting, or raiding. This slow erosion of muscle and strength made every task harder and every injury more debilitating. Other micronutrient deficiencies beyond these major deficiencies. The monotonous diet inevitably lacked numerous other essential vitamins and minerals. This created a complex web of subtle deficiencies that contributed to overall physical weakness, compromised immune systems, and made you susceptible to a host of other illnesses and infections. Your body was constantly fighting a hidden hunger, slowly breaking down from within, even if you weren't actively starving, making you a prime target for any circulating pathogen. The cumulative impacts: a weakened immune system. This constant, underlying state of chronic malnutrition severely compromised your immune system, your body's defences, already weakened by chronic physical exertion, sleep deprivation from demanding schedules, and exposure to the harsh climate cold. Dampness, extreme temperatures were utterly depleted. This meant that common illnesses like colds, flus, or minor infections, which a well-nourished body could typically fight off, could quickly escalate into life-threatening conditions like pneumonia or sepsis blood poisoning. You were perpetually vulnerable, a walking target for every pathogen, and your body was ill-equipped to fight back effectively, turning minor ailments into mortal threats. It truly sucked to be a walking petri dish. Psychological toll: despair and resignation. The psychological toll of living with chronic health decay would be immense. You would live with perpetual aches and pains, constant fatigue, and the gnawing awareness that your body was slowly failing, the visible signs of illness in your neighbours and family members, their bleeding gums, their bowed limbs, their emaciated forms, or their quiet deaths from mysterious ailments, would reinforce the grim reality. The lack of understanding about the true causes of these illnesses, often attributing them to divine wrath or mischievous spirits. As explored in the horrifying superstitions that controlled a Viking's daily life, would leave you feeling helpless and despairing. This constant physical misery, coupled with profound ignorance about its origins, would erode your spirit, leaving you in a state of weariness and quiet resignation, making your life a constant internal battle against your own decaying body. Your existence was a perpetual test of endurance against the relentless decay of your own flesh. It truly sucked to feel your body slowly give up. Medical impotence. No real cure. Medical knowledge and care were tragically primitive. While Viking society had healers who understood herbal remedies and basic wound care, they had no concept of vitamins, minerals, or the specific dietary causes of these debilitating illnesses. You would suffer and eventually die from ailments that modern medicine could easily diagnose and treat. This medical impotence, combined with the continuous dietary inadequacies, ensured your body's slow, agonizing decline. Your best hope was simply your body's innate, brute resilience, which eventually wore out, condemning you to a painful, lingering death. Archaeological confirmation bones tell the tale. One common misconception is that Viking Age people, being hardy and living an active, outdoor life, were inherently healthier than modern populations. In reality, while they were undoubtedly resilient, their overall health was significantly worse than today, and their lifespans drastically shorter, precisely due to the prevalence of infectious diseases, malnutrition, and limited medical knowledge. Archaeological studies of Viking Age skeletal remains from various sites, e.g. burial grounds in Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and settlements in Iceland or Greenland, consistently show widespread evidence of chronic infectious diseases, such as osteomyelitis, bone infections often secondary to dental or wound infections, tuberculosis, leprosy in some areas, and even signs of syphilis from the late Viking Age onwards in some regions. These findings, combined with evidence of severe nutritional deficiencies, scurvy, anemia, rickets, often visible as porous bones, or lines of arrested growth on long bones, and extensive dental pathologies, cavities, abscesses, severe wear, and bone infections, directly contradict romanticized notions of Viking health and confirm the devastating impact of pervasive disease and malnutrition on their lifespan. These grim details, literally etched in bone, provide undeniable proof of their widespread suffering. Historians and bioarchaeologists still meticulously study these osteological records, and microscopic analysis of bone growth patterns, signs of stress, and lesions, and compare them with demographic inferences from sagas and textual accounts to paint a comprehensive, and often grim, picture of Viking Age health for all segments of the population. The shortened lifespan, a cumulative burden. The cumulative effect of this chronic malnutrition, constant exposure, and pervasive infection over a lifetime was a significantly shortened lifespan, even if you escaped violent death from warfare or accidents. The slow, insidious decay of your body from within, caused by a constant lack of essential nutrients and microbial assault, would inevitably lead to a premature demise. Your body was perpetually under siege, its resources depleted, leaving you highly susceptible to any number of fatal illnesses that a healthy, well-nourished body could easily fight off today. Your life was a testament to endurance, but rarely to vitality or comfortable longevity. The constant battle against a body slowly consumed by disease ensured a quick end. The cycle of vulnerability, work and weakness, the constant need for physical exertion in Viking Age life, farming, crafting, raiding, travelling, combined with chronic illness, created a cruel feedback loop. Sickness made you weaker, less able to work. Less work meant less food and less fuel, which in turn made you more susceptible to illness. This vicious cycle often plunged individuals and families into a rapid decline from which there was no recovery, ending their short lives in agonizing misery. Your body was a constant draw on a perpetually empty nutritional bank. So, your life in the Viking Age was consumed by malnutrition's slow decay. Your monotonous, often deficient diet, lacking essential vitamins, minerals, and consistent protein, systematically eroded your body. This led to debilitating diseases like scurvy and anemia, severe dental decay, and overall physical decline. This constant, insidious breakdown of your health, guaranteeing a short, painful life, was a defining, profoundly, horrifyingly short aspect of your existence in the Viking Age, ensuring that your survival was a continuous battle against a body slowly consumed by unseen hungers and pervasive illness, even as your body wasted away from malnutrition and your spirit battled constant illness. Your life in the Viking Age was plagued by a particularly agonizing and universal torment for women dental doom. Forget a bright smile. Your mouth was a landscape of pervasive agony, rampant infection, and the constant risk of fatal complications from oral ailments, making your existence profoundly horrifyingly short. Imagine the constant, gnawing ache that would often dominate your every thought. For almost every Viking Age individual, regardless of social status, dental pain was an inescapable reality. Your diet, heavily reliant on coarse grains, barley, oats. Rye that were ground with primitive querns millstones meant that your daily bread and gruel contained significant amounts of grit, sand, and tiny stone particles chipped from the grinding stones, every bite of your food, day in and day out, for decades. Introduce these abrasive elements directly into your mouth. It truly sucked to literally eat rocks for dinner, every single day. This constant ingestion of abrasive particles led to severe and relentless dental wear attrition. Imagine chewing on something akin to fine sandpaper with every meal, day in and day out, for decades. Your tooth enamel, the hard outer layer, would be slowly but surely ground down, eroding to expose the softer, more sensitive dentin beneath. Once the enamel was gone, bacteria could more easily penetrate, accelerating the formation and progression of caries. These cavities would bore deeper and deeper into the tooth, exposing the sensitive pulp and nerves, leading to agonizing, persistent pain that would consume your entire existence, making eating, drinking, or even speaking an ordeal. Imagine the constant, throbbing agony radiating through your jaw and head that made sleep impossible and basic daily tasks unbearable. It truly sucked to literally chew your way to constant agony. Beyond cavities, gum disease, periodontal disease was rampant due to the profound lack of effective oral hygiene. There was no concept of modern toothbrushes, toothpaste, or floss, at best. You might rub your teeth with your fingers or chew on a twig. This meant a constant build-up of plaque and tartar, leading to inflammation, bleeding gums, and ultimately, the recession of gums and the loosening of teeth. Imagine your gums perpetually bleeding when you chewed, feeling your teeth subtly shift in their sockets. Knowing this would inevitably lead to further pain and tooth loss, this chronic inflammation contributed to a constant, unpleasant taste in your mouth and a pervasive, sickening odour. The most terrifying consequence of this oral decay was infection's relentless scourge. Once decay reached the pulp and root of the tooth, severe infections, abscesses, would form painful pockets of pus that caused immense swelling in your face and jaw, often accompanied by high fever and profound weakness. These localized infections, if left untreated, could rapidly spread locally into the surrounding tissues of your jaw, face and neck, causing cellulitis, a rapidly spreading bacterial skin infection, and potentially forming new, larger abscesses that could even rupture through your skin, leaving grotesque, draining sores. Systemically, sepsis. This was the ultimate killer. Bacteria from the dental abscess could enter your bloodstream, leading to sepsis, blood poisoning. Once sepsis set in, the infection would spread rapidly throughout your entire body, causing widespread inflammation, organ dysfunction, and eventually multi-organ failure. You would suffer from a raging, uncontrollable fever, violent chills, confusion, rapid heartbeat, and agonizing internal pain. Your body effectively consumed from within, leading to agonizing death. Many Viking Age individuals died not from the original toothache, but from the untreated sepsis following a severe dental infection. It truly sucked to literally rot to death from a tooth. To the brain in severe cases, particularly if an upper jaw infection spread, the bacteria could travel to the brain, causing meningitis, inflammation of the membranes surrounding the brain and spinal cord or brain abscesses. These conditions were almost universally fatal, leading to severe headaches, stiff neck, seizures, coma, and rapid death. Imagine the terrifying progression from a toothache to brain fever, your mind slipping away into darkness. Medical knowledge and care for dental problems were brutally primitive. There were no dentists. Your only recourse was to endure the pain or seek a crude intervention from a barber surgeon or a blacksmith, as explored in The Brutal Reality of Medieval Dentistry. Tooth extraction was performed without effective anesthesia, using crude, unsterilized tools like pliers or pelicans, causing immense pain, shattered teeth, and frequently fractured jaws. This brutal process itself often introduced new bacteria, turning a localized infection into a systemic, deadly one. Your best hope was that the tooth simply fell out, or that your body's resilience was enough to fight off the infection. A gamble few won. The physical consequences of this pervasive oral decay were profound and lasting, beyond the constant pain. You would likely suffer from severe dental disfigurement, missing teeth, black, decaying stumps, swollen jaws, and perhaps even facial asymmetry from improperly healed fractures. This would impact your ability to chew properly, forcing you to rely on softer, less nutritious foods like gruel, exacerbating malnutrition. It would also affect your speech and your overall appearance, leading to a constant, subtle social stigma, as we saw in The Miserable Stinking Reality of Living in a Medieval Castle. It really sucked to have your face scarred by your mouth. The psychological toll of living with chronic oral pain, recurring infections, and the gradual loss of your teeth would be immense. You would constantly battle against the agony, the swelling, and the discharge, knowing that your body was being consumed by an unseen enemy. The fear of escalating complications, of seeing your face deform or your body racked by fever, would be a constant source of anxiety. You would likely witness others in your community suffering similar fates, reinforcing the grim reality. This pervasive fear of infection, this constant awareness of death lurking in your mouth, would erode your spirit, leaving you in a state of profound dread and helplessness. Your smile, if you dared, would be a testament to your unending suffering. One common misconception is that Viking Age people had strong, healthy teeth because they didn't consume modern refined sugar, while their sugar intake was lower. Archaeological studies of Viking Age skeletal remains consistently show widespread and severe dental pathologies across all social classes. These findings include rampant tooth decay, caries, severe dental wear, attrition from coarse, gritty diets, extensive preapical abscesses, infections at the root tip, and significant ante-mortem teeth lost before death, across all social strata. This bioarchaeological evidence confirms that oral disease and pain were near universal experiences in the Viking Age, regardless of the lack of modern sweets. The presence of these pervasive dental issues serves as a stark reminder of the limitations of ancient diets and oral hygiene practices. Historians and bioarchaeologists still meticulously study these osteological records, agonizing, microscopic analysis of tooth wear patterns and lesions to reconstruct the precise dietary habits and their devastating impact on Viking Age oral health, confirming that dental problems were a pervasive reality, often leading to chronic suffering and early death from complications. Furthermore, the lack of public health education regarding oral hygiene meant there was no societal push for preventative care. Parents wouldn't teach their children to brush their teeth because the concept simply didn't exist. This ensured that the cycle of neglect, decay, and chronic pain was perpetuated across generations, with each individual destined to suffer the same oral miseries as their ancestors. Your fate was sealed by your birth into a world without dental knowledge, condemning you to an almost inevitable lifetime of oral agony. The social stigma of severe halitosis, bad breath and visible dental decay, though pervasive and normalized by its commonality, was still subtly acknowledged. While people were accustomed to strong odours in medieval society, medieval satirical writings or personal accounts sometimes mentioned bad breath as an undesirable trait. This meant that while everyone might suffer, the physical manifestation of your oral misery could still affect your social interactions, adding another layer of discomfort to your daily life. The cumulative effect of this lifelong lack of hygiene was a mouthful of pain, infection, and decay by middle age. Few Viking Age people would have possessed a full set of healthy teeth into adulthood. Most would suffer from chronic toothaches, gum disease, and missing teeth, leading to a lifetime of oral misery and often a shortened lifespan due to associated infections. Your very ability to nourish yourself would eventually be compromised by the state of your teeth, creating a cruel feedback loop of physical decline. So, your life in the Viking Age was consumed by dental doom, transforming your mouth into a landscape of pervasive agony, rampant infection, and terrifying decay, the relentless assault of your diet, combined with the horrifying lack of oral hygiene and primitive dental care, ensured that your constant oral suffering was a defining, profoundly horrifyingly short aspect of your life in the Viking Age, ensuring that your survival was a continuous battle against a body slowly consumed by unseen hungers and pervasive illness, even as your mouth suffered the relentless agony of dental doom and your body wasted away from disease. Your life as a Viking woman faced perhaps its most terrifying and universal peril, childbirth's deadly lottery. Forget a joyous occasion, every pregnancy was a high-stakes gamble, and the astronomically high maternal mortality rates made bringing new life into the world a profoundly horrifyingly short and often fatal ordeal. Imagine the pervasive dread that would settle upon you the moment you realized you were pregnant, while the prospect of a new child, especially a son who would carry on the family name and contribute to labour, would bring immense joy and hope. The reality of childbirth was universally acknowledged as one of the most dangerous and terrifying experiences a medieval woman could face. It was literally a matter of life or death, a gamble with your very existence, that you would likely face multiple times in your fertile years. It truly sucked to be pregnant in medieval times. The mortality rates for mothers during childbirth or in the immediate postpartum period were astronomically high throughout the Viking Age, mirroring and sometimes exceeding similar rates across medieval Europe. Historians estimate that anywhere from 10% to 30% of women died from childbirth-related complications. For every woman who survived, many others perished, leaving behind orphaned newborns and grieving families. You would likely know numerous women in your village or social circle who had died in childbirth, or whose infants had succumbed to illness. The fear was personal, visceral, and omnipresent, a constant shadow over every pregnancy. The reasons for this horrifying maternal mortality were manifold and deeply intertwined with the harsh realities of Viking Age life, creating a constant, multifaceted assault on new life, prolonged and obstructed labour. Without modern interventions like oxytocin to strengthen contractions, forceps, or caesarean sections, difficult or prolonged labours could stretch for many hours, even days, if the baby was too large, or its position was abnormal, ébonré, breech presentation, where the feet or buttocks come first, or transverse lie, where the baby lies sideways. Labour could become obstructed. Midwives, however skilled, had limited options beyond manual manipulation, often agonizingly painful and dangerous, or, in desperate, last resort cases, crude instruments to dismember the fetus in utero to save the mother's life, a procedure that was almost universally fatal for the infant and carried immense risk for the mother. The physical exhaustion alone from prolonged labour could be fatal, weakening you to the point where your body simply gave up, leaving you vulnerable to severe complications. It really sucked to push for days, knowing it might kill you. Hemorrhage, excessive bleeding. This was a leading killer after childbirth. If the uterus failed to contract adequately, uterine atony, or if fragments of the placenta remained inside, profuse bleeding would occur. Midwives had no understanding of these physiological mechanisms, and crucially, no means for blood transfusions. You would simply bleed out, your body rapidly weakening as vital blood drained onto the straw-covered floor. The speed of death from severe hemorrhage was horrifyingly swift, transforming the joy of birth into immediate, profound tragedy. Puerperal fever, childbed fever, an insidious killer as explored in a previous episode about medieval childbirth. Chapter 6. This was an infection of the reproductive organs caused by bacteria introduced during labour or delivery. Without understanding of germ theory, midwives and attendants would unknowingly carry bacteria on their unwashed hands or instruments directly into your open womb. The infection would spread rapidly, leading to a raging fever, severe abdominal pain, sepsis, blood poisoning, and agonizing death within days or weeks postpartum. Your body, already weakened by labour, would be consumed from within by unseen pathogens. It truly sucked to survive giving birth, only to die from an infection caused by the hands that delivered your baby. Eclampsia, preeclampsia conditions, causing dangerously high blood pressure, swelling, and seizures, often leading to coma and death for both mother and child. These were undiagnosable and untreatable. Sudden, terrifying events weakened maternal health. Your body, especially as a common Viking woman, was often already compromised by chronic malnutrition from a meagre, monotonous diet, demanding physical labour, and frequent pregnancies. This pre-existing weakness meant your body had little reserve to withstand the immense trauma of childbirth, or the subsequent onslaught of infection. You were often running on empty, even before labour began, making you incredibly vulnerable. Pain management was virtually non-existent. You would endure the agony of labour unmedicated, at best. You might receive some strong ale or wine to dull your senses, or herbs like poppy juice, opium or mandrake, both unreliable and often dangerous due to unpredictable side effects on mother and child. More commonly, you would simply be given a piece of cloth to bite down on. Your screams filling the longhouse, a primal symphony of unadulterated suffering. Your mental fortitude was your only true painkiller. It really sucked to give birth without anything for the pain. The psychological toll on you, the mother, would be immense. You would constantly live with the pervasive, chilling dread of childbirth, knowing the high likelihood of death for both yourself and your baby, the agony of labour, the terrifying complications, and the profound grief of losing children, as discussed in Chapter 1, would leave indelible scars on your psyche. You would experience repeated cycles of hope, profound love, heartbreaking loss, and renewed attempts, leading to profound emotional scarring and a pervasive sense of helplessness. Imagine the constant awareness of your own mortality, knowing that each pregnancy was a potential, final gamble. It truly sucked to live a life of constant grieving. The naming customs of the Viking Age sometimes subtly reflected this high infant mortality. Some parents might delay naming a child until it survived its first few weeks or months, a grim acknowledgement of the low odds. The practice of giving children the names of deceased siblings was also common, highlighting both the continuity of the family line and the pervasive reality of infant loss. This unique detail underscores how deeply integrated child mortality was into the fabric of Viking Age life, a silent backdrop to every pregnancy and birth. The social context heavily influenced this. In Viking society, women were valued for their ability to run the household, produce cloth, and crucially, bear children, particularly sons, who would carry on the family name and contribute to labour. This intense societal pressure meant that women were often expected, and compelled by necessity and societal pressure, to have numerous pregnancies throughout their fertile years, further increasing their cumulative risk of death from childbirth-related complications. The concept of family planning or limiting pregnancies was virtually non-existent, driven by biological imperative and societal expectations rather than personal choice. Your body was a vessel for lineage, not entirely your own. One common misconception is that all Viking women were simply tough and survived childbirth easily due to a more natural lifestyle. In reality, while they were undoubtedly resilient, Their bodies were not biologically different from modern women. The high mortality rates were due to the systemic lack of medical knowledge, unsanitary conditions, and the absence of life-saving interventions that we take for granted today. Their resilience was born of necessity, not inherent biological superiority. Postpartum hemorrhage and puerperal fever were arguably the leading causes of maternal death in the days and weeks after childbirth, even if the labour itself seemed successful. Accounts from Viking sagas which sometimes mention deaths related to childbirth, though often briefly, and archaeological findings of female skeletal remains consistently show signs of multiple pregnancies, birth trauma, and related infections, confirming the brutal reality. Historians still meticulously study medieval medical texts like those detailing birthing complications and postpartum care from a broader European context, as direct Viking medical texts are rare, and osteoarchaeological evidence from female skeletal remains looking for signs of birth canal trauma, pubic symphysis separation, or postpartum infections to understand the precise causes and prevalence of maternal mortality and the specific challenges that plagued childbirth in the Viking Age. Furthermore, the lack of any immediate surgical intervention for emergencies like obstructed labour meant that if a baby was malpositioned or too large, the only recourse for the midwife was often to wait, praying for a miracle, or, as a last resort, to perform gruesome procedures that sacrificed the baby to save the mother, or often led to the death of both. This helplessness in the face of severe complications guaranteed tragic outcomes for countless women. Your physical endurance was immense, but it was often tragically futile against such overwhelming odds. The absence of a sterile environment also meant that even a seemingly minor laceration during delivery could become a death sentence. The open wound, exposed to bacteria from unwashed hands, contaminated instruments, or the general filth of the birthing room, would quickly become infected, leading to agonizing pain and potential sepsis. This terrifying, invisible threat meant that even if the birth itself seemed successful, the mother was still in profound danger for weeks afterward, turning relief into prolonged anxiety. The ultimate tragedy was that for most Viking women, the joy of a new life was constantly overshadowed by the very real possibility of losing their own. This cycle of intense pain, profound risk, heartbreak, and renewal defined their reproductive years, forging a deep resilience, but also leaving them with permanent physical and emotional scars. Childbirth was a constant reminder of mortality, a brutal lottery for life itself, where the act of giving life was perpetually shadowed by death. So, your life in the Viking Age was profoundly, horrifyingly short because of childbirth's deadly lottery, the astronomically high maternal mortality rates, caused by agonizing labours, terrifying hemorrhage, and rampant puerperal fever, ensured that every pregnancy was a high-stakes gamble. This relentless cycle of pain, risk, and profound personal sacrifice, leaving countless women to perish in the act of giving life, was a defining, profoundly miserable aspect of your existence as a Viking woman. You've endured the horrifying gamble of infant mortality, suffered through brutal toil and harsh realities in childhood, battled the unforgiving cold of the landscape, fought against the insidious spread of disease, faced the constant threat of violent death in war and raids, suffered debilitating accidents and injuries, withered from malnutrition's slow decay, agonized over dental doom, and finally endured the terrifying, deadly lottery of childbirth. As the phantom pain subsides and the echoes of ancient life finally dissipate, a profound, lingering truth settles upon you. Your life in the Viking Age was horrifyingly short, a brutal saga of relentless struggle, pervasive suffering, and often an anonymous, violent end. The fundamental precariousness, a constant battle for existence, Consider the fundamental precariousness of your life that defined every single moment of your existence. From the moment of your birth, you faced overwhelming odds against survival, with a tragically high chance of succumbing to disease or accident in infancy. If you lived, your childhood was consumed by demanding labour and early responsibilities, preparing you for a life of ceaseless toil. The very environment at the biting cold, the unpredictable seas, the meagre land was a constant adversary, chipping away at your health and vitality. Your survival hinged on a delicate balance, constantly threatened by forces far beyond your control, both natural and human. It truly sucked to constantly be one step from the grave, from birth until your dying breath. Unrelenting physical suffering, body under siege. Then there's the unrelenting physical suffering that characterized your daily life. Your body was perpetually cold, often malnourished, and constantly battling a myriad of diseases from unsanitary living conditions. You endured chronic pain from arduous labour, frequent injuries that healed imperfectly, leaving lasting disabilities and chronic discomfort, and debilitating conditions like scurvy and severe dental decay. Every breath was a struggle against lung disease exacerbated by smoke inhalation, every meal a battle against toothache caused by gritty food, and every major physical exertion a risk of injury. Your body was a testament to immense resilience, but it was also a canvas of pervasive pain and slow decay, inevitably wearing out long before what we consider old age. You were constantly breaking down, both inside and out. Your physical existence a continuous battle against deterioration, pervasive violence, death lurking everywhere. And what about the constant threat of violent death? The Viking Age was a period defined by its pervasive culture of warfare, raiding, and local feuds. Whether you were a warrior facing a rival's axe in battle, a farmer defending your home from raiders, or a thrall caught in the chaos of a siege, violent death was a pervasive reality. Accidents from crude tools, agricultural mishaps, or treacherous environments like drowning in icy waters were common and often fatal, claiming lives indiscriminately. For women, childbirth itself was a terrifying, deadly lottery. With astronomically high maternal mortality rates, your life could be extinguished abruptly, without warning, or after prolonged suffering, ensuring that your existence was a continuous dance with mortality, where death could come from a myriad of sources, often unrelated to direct combat. It truly sucked to be perpetually in harm's way, every single day. The mental toll, fear, trauma, and despair. Finally, the immense psychological burden that accompanied such a brutal existence. You lived with constant fear, fear of famine, fear of plague, fear of violence, fear of injury, fear of death. The sight of your loved ones suffering and dying from unseen illnesses or brutal accidents would leave indelible scars on your psyche. The pervasive anxiety about basic survival. The knowledge that your efforts might be futile against the whims of nature or the blade of an enemy, bred despair and a grim fatalism. You were forced to develop a stoicism to cope, but beneath the hardened exterior lay a spirit perpetually on edge, marked by trauma, and often consumed by a profound sense of helplessness. Your mind was a constant battleground, ensuring that even if your body survived, your spirit might be irrevocably broken, a grim historical reality beyond romanticized sagas. The overall reality of life in the Viking Age, as illuminated by archaeological and historical evidence, paints a picture far removed from simplistic romanticizations. It was a period of incredible human achievement exploration, trade, complex social structures, and impressive craftsmanship. However, these triumphs were achieved by individuals who faced a constant, pervasive struggle for survival against overwhelming odds, the high mortality rates across all age groups, the prevalence of disease including scurvy, anemia, and dental infections, the constant threat of violence for warriors and civilians alike, and the demands of a harsh environment defined their brief existences. Their resilience, their tenacity, and their ability to endure profound suffering are undeniable, but they come with a heavy, horrifying price. The sagas, while focusing on heroic deeds, often implicitly reveal the pervasive hardship endured by the common folk, an anonymous end, the unsung cost of survival. One particularly poignant and often overlooked detail is the anonymous nature of much of this suffering. While chieftains and famous explorers might be remembered in sagas and marked by elaborate burials, as explored in What a Disturbing Viking Funeral for a Chieftain Was Like. Chapter 10. The vast majority of the population, the common farmers, the thralls, the women, and the children who endured the bulk of these horrifying conditions, remain unnamed in history. Their personal stories of battling scurvy, surviving accidents, or dying of plague in a remote longhouse are lost to time, overshadowed by the grandeur of the overall Viking Age narrative. Their contributions to the survival of their communities, their immense physical and emotional sacrifices, were largely unacknowledged. The vast number of simple, often unmarked, graves in Viking Age cemeteries bear silent witness to these forgotten lives. Their lives were a brutal, relentless struggle, culminating in an end that, for many, was both premature and utterly anonymous. It truly sucked to be an unsung casualty of daily survival, whose life went unrecorded. Historians still meticulously study bioarchaeological data from Viking Age skeletal remains and age, population profiles from cemeteries, dental health, signs of trauma and disease on bones, alongside demographic inferences from sagas and textual records, to understand the precise mortality rates, causes of death, and the vast number of unremembered lives that shaped the Viking Age. Ultimately, your experience of how horrifyingly short your life was in the Viking Age reveals a profound truth about human existence in a challenging era. It was a life defined by a constant, brutal negotiation with nature, disease, violence, and economic scarcity. Every day was a battle for survival, every milestone a hard-won victory against overwhelming odds, and every breath a gamble, this relentless struggle, marked by immense suffering and the pervasive threat of an early, often agonizing and anonymous end, was a testament to incredible human endurance, but also to the profoundly horrifyingly short nature of life in the Viking Age. As you now drift into a deep, comforting sleep, let the distant echoes of ancient Norse settlements and the imagined struggles of a short, brutal life finally subside. You are safe, warm and well fed, incredibly far removed from the perils and hardships of the past. May your dreams be peaceful, filled with the quiet certainty of comfort, longevity, and the profound freedom to live a life not defined by constant struggle against death. A stark contrast to the horrifying truth we've explored tonight. And now, good night, and have sweet dreams.